I am Zuri, 32 years old, and the founder of a commercial real estate acquisition firm in Atlanta. Standing in my penthouse overlooking the city lights, I held a glass of bourbon and pressed play on the sleek sound system. My mother, Valerie, had an arrogant, sharp tone that filled the room. Zuri, you do not need to come to the closing of the Buckhead estate tomorrow. Preston has handled all the financing. We do not need your jealousy ruining your sister Chloe and her new husband's big day. Do not bother coming back. We are moving on without you. I took a slow sip of my drink, the liquid burning pleasantly down my throat. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just smiled. My family thought Preston, the arrogant white financial broker who married my light-skinned sister, was the savior of our family. They thought his supposed hedge fund was buying them a $3 million mansion. What they did not know was that Preston had no fund. The money he was supposedly pulling from was a blind trust I had quietly set up and funded entirely with my own real estate profits to preserve my grandfather's legacy and save my mother's pride. My mother had always worshipped Chloe. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood, Chloe was the golden child. She had the lighter skin, the looser curls, the perfect smile that my mother prized above all else. I was too dark, too loud, too ambitious. While Chloe spent her 20s failing at 3 different boutique businesses funded by my mother's shrinking retirement account, I was working 80-hour weeks closing commercial property deals. Yet when Chloe married Preston, a man who threw around microaggressions at family dinners and treated me like the help, my mother crowned him the king of the family. I pulled out my phone and typed a single-word response to my mother. Okay. Then I dialed my wealth manager. The phone rang only twice before he answered. Marcus, I said, keeping my voice perfectly steady. Pull the plug. Cancel the escrow transfer for the Buckhead property immediately. Freeze all assets in the Harrington Family Trust. Lock it down completely. Marcus paused for a second. Zuri, if we pull the escrow now, they will lose the earnest money. The sellers might even press charges against the broker representing the buyer if the funds were misrepresented. I took another sip of my bourbon. That sounds like a problem for the broker. Freeze it all. I ended the call and tossed my phone onto the marble kitchen island. Preston thought he could use my anonymous trust to look like a hero, while simultaneously convincing my mother to cut me out of the picture. He had no idea the invisible benefactor he was leeching off of was the same black woman he constantly talked down to at Thanksgiving dinner. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows looking down at the endless stream of traffic on Peachtree Street. I thought about the first time Preston insulted me. It was at their engagement party. He had handed me his empty champagne flute and asked me to fetch him another, assuming the dark-skinned woman in the tailored suit was part of the catering staff. When my mother saw it, she did not correct him. She simply pulled me aside and told me not to make a scene because Preston came from a good family and Chloe needed this win. That was the day I realized my mother would gladly throw me under the bus if it meant keeping up appearances for her country club friends. For 10 years, I had secretly kept our family afloat. When my mother almost lost her own house, I bought the mortgage through a shell company so she would never know her discarded daughter was her landlord. I funneled money into the family trust under my grandfather's name so she could keep wearing her designer clothes and hosting her lavish church events. I did it because I believed in loyalty. I believed that one day my mother would look at me and finally see my worth. But tonight, listening to her tell me not to come back, I realized loyalty was a one-way street. My phone screen lit up on the counter. It was a text from Chloe. Mom said she left you a message. Please do not cause drama tomorrow. Preston worked so hard to secure this house for us. He even called in favors from his wealthy clients. You could learn a lot from him if you were not so bitter. I scoffed at the screen. Bitter. That was their favorite word for me. If I pointed out Preston's condescending remarks, I was angry. If I talked about my business acquisitions, I was arrogant. If I refused to fund Chloe's lavish lifestyle directly, I was bitter. I opened my banking app and watched the escrow account balance drop to zero as Marcus executed my orders. The $3 million allocated for their dream home vanished from the ledger, safely routed back into my private holding company. The trap was set. Preston had signed legal documents guaranteeing those funds. He had staked his professional license on a phantom fortune. Without that money, the closing would not just fail. It would trigger a federal investigation into his financial practices. The silence in my penthouse felt incredibly peaceful. I walked into my bedroom, slipped off my suit jacket, and prepared for a good night of sleep. I knew what tomorrow would bring. I knew the exact moment the bankers would sit around that mahogany table and realize the accounts were dry. I knew Preston would panic and try to blame some glitch in the system. But the bank would trace the trust. They would demand answers. Just as I closed my eyes, my phone buzzed again. An email notification illuminated the dark room. It was from the escrow agency, an automated message confirming the cancellation of the transfer. The match was officially lit. Preston thought he was untouchable. My mother thought she had finally secured her place in high society. They were about to wake up to a reality where the very person they deemed a failure held the keys to their entire existence. I set my alarm for 6 in the morning, ready to head to my corporate office and watch the absolute destruction of their perfect facade. Tomorrow they would learn exactly what happens when you tell the person holding up your world to let go. I woke up exactly 1 minute before my alarm, my mind sharp and completely clear. There was no lingering guilt, no heavy weight of familial obligation pressing down on my chest. For the first time in 10 years, I was completely weightless. I stepped into the marble master bathroom, the heated floors warming my bare feet. My phone sat perfectly aligned on the edge of the double vanity. The screen was already a glowing waterfall of notifications. It vibrated against the stone, a relentless, angry buzz that echoed through the quiet penthouse. I did not reach for it. Instead, I turned on the rainfall shower, letting the steam fill the room, washing away the last decade of my mother's condescension and my sister's entitlement. When I emerged wrapped in a plush robe, the buzzing had not stopped. I walked over to the vanity and leaned in close to the mirror, applying my eyeliner with a steady, practiced hand. I glanced down at the glowing screen. 40 missed calls, 14 from Valerie, 26 from Chloe. I tapped the screen, unlocking it, to reveal the timeline of their unraveling. At exactly 8 o'clock in the morning, the scheduled start time for their luxurious closing, the messages were simply annoyed. Valerie had texted Zuri, "The title agent is being ridiculous and asking for verification codes. Call the bank and authorize the release. We do not have time for your childish games today." 10 minutes later, Chloe chimed in. "Zuri, pick up the phone. Preston is incredibly stressed right now, and you are making him look bad in front of the sellers." By 8:30, the annoyance had mutated into sheer confusion. Valerie left a voicemail. I tapped the speaker icon, letting her frantic voice bounce off the marble walls while I slipped into my armor for the day. A sharply tailored emerald green Alexander McQueen power suit. The cut was ruthless, the shoulders structured, the pants falling perfectly over my black Christian Louboutin pumps. "Zuri, I demand you call me back this instant." Valerie's recorded voice trembled, stripping away her usual high society country club polish. "The bank manager is telling Preston the escrow account does not exist. He is saying the Harrington Family Trust has been frozen by the primary account holder. I told them that is impossible because Preston is the financial manager. Fix this banking error right now. People are staring at us." I fastened a simple diamond necklace around my throat, watching my reflection. A banking error. They were so blinded by their own arrogance, so deeply invested in the myth of Preston's financial genius, that they still could not comprehend the reality. They genuinely believed a bank glitch was preventing them from buying a $3 million mansion with my money. The phone vibrated again in my hand. A new text message popped up on the screen, this time from Preston. The preview showed a block of aggressive text. I opened it, reading his words with a profound sense of satisfaction. "What did you do with the transfer? You are ruining Chloe's dream house. The bank is treating me like a criminal. You need to call your little manager friend and release the funds immediately. You are just an angry, bitter dropout who is jealous of everything Chloe has. Fix this right now, or I am calling our lawyer and having you sued for tortious interference. Do not test me, Zuri." I laughed out loud. The sound was rich and full, echoing in the vast emptiness of my bedroom. Preston, a man who had lost his brokerage license for moving client money into doomed crypto portfolios, was threatening to sue me for interfering with my own private trust. The sheer audacity of his entitlement was almost impressive. He had spent 2 years living in a house I paid for, driving a car I leased, and eating food bought with my corporate dividends, all while calling me bitter and uneducated. I walked out of the bedroom and down the long hallway toward my sleek, minimalist kitchen. The built-in espresso machine hummed to life at the touch of a button. I placed a small porcelain cup under the spout, watching the rich, dark liquid pour perfectly. I did not text Preston back. I did not call my mother. I simply took a sip of my espresso, the bitter roasted flavor grounding me in the reality of my triumph. I imagined the scene playing out across town in that stuffy Buckhead law office. I pictured Valerie wearing her best Chanel suit, trying to maintain a polite smile while the sellers tapped their luxury watches. I pictured Chloe clutching her pregnant belly, looking to her husband to be the savior he always claimed to be. And I pictured Preston sweating through his custom-tailored dress shirt, stuttering as the bank executives explained that he had zero legal authority over the Harrington family trust. The phantom wealth he used to elevate himself above his black in-laws had evaporated into thin air. I finished my espresso and set the cup gently in the sink. Grabbing my black Birkin bag from the counter, I tossed my buzzing phone inside. I stepped into my private elevator, the doors sliding shut and cutting off the noise of the penthouse. The ride down to the private garage was silent. My driver, a retired police officer who had been working for me for 3 years, stood by the open door of my black SUV. "Good morning, Ms. Harrington," he said with a respectful nod. "Good morning," I replied, sliding into the plush leather seat. "Take me to the office, please." The drive through Atlanta was a victory lap. I looked out the tinted windows at the towering glass and steel structures. I owned partial stakes in 3 of the commercial buildings we passed. I had built a real estate acquisition firm that managed hundreds of millions in assets. I was not a college dropout playing with a lucky inheritance. I was a predator in a corporate jungle, and my family had mistaken me for prey. As the SUV pulled up to the sleek glass building that housed my firm, I took a deep breath. My name, Z Harrington Acquisitions, was etched in frosted glass on the double doors. I stepped out of the vehicle, the morning air crisp and cool against my face. I walked through the lobby, my heels clicking rhythmically against the polished terrazzo floor. My staff greeted me with sharp nods and focused respect. I knew exactly what was coming next. Preston would not take this humiliation sitting down. He was a cornered animal, stripped of his fake wealth and exposed in front of the very people he sought to impress. He would come looking for me. He would demand answers. He would try to intimidate me using the same aggressive tactics that always worked on my mother and sister. But he was about to step into my territory, and I was more than ready for the ambush. The elevator doors chimed and slid open to the top floor. My floor. The brushed steel letters of Z Harrington Acquisitions gleamed against the slate-gray accent wall. I stepped out, my heels sinking slightly into the plush carpet, the morning sunlight filtering through the wraparound glass walls. The air up here was always crisp, smelling faintly of expensive cedar and polished leather. I barely made it 10 paces past the reception desk when I heard the frantic, heavy footfalls hitting the floorboards behind me. Zuri, stop walking." I did not stop. I did not even turn my head. The camera of my mind tracked backward, keeping my serene, unbothered expression dead center in the frame as Preston practically jogged to catch up. His breath was already coming in short, ragged bursts. He had managed to bypass the lobby security downstairs, likely bullying the front desk guard by throwing around my mother's name or claiming a dire family emergency. He forced himself into my peripheral vision, his face flushed a blotchy, panicked red. He was wearing a tailored navy suit that suddenly looked a size too tight. His usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled, a thin sheen of nervous sweat coating his forehead. He matched my stride, stepping aggressively into my space, trying to use his physical size to intimidate me. It was a classic tactic of his, looming over women to assert a dominance he entirely lacked in his actual character. "Did you not hear my messages?" he hissed, trying to keep his voice down as my staff watched us from their glass-walled cubicles. "We have a massive problem. Marcus is freezing the transfer. He is claiming you ordered a hold on the Harrington Trust. You need to call him right now and clear up this banking error. We are supposed to sign the final deeds in exactly 3 hours. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, navigating the sleek modern hallway of the empire I had built from nothing. A banking error. He was still desperately clinging to that delusion like a life raft. He genuinely believed that I was just a minor hurdle, a clerical nuisance that he could easily bully into submission. He could not fathom that I held the leash. When I did not answer, his tone shifted from frantic urgency to vicious cruelty. The polite country club son-in-law mask dissolved completely, revealing the ugly entitled core underneath. "Look at me when I am talking to you, Zuri," he demanded, his voice echoing slightly against the glass partitions. "I know exactly what you are doing. You are trying to sabotage Chloe. You have always been insanely jealous of her. You cannot stand that she is the one getting the dream house, the perfect marriage, the life you will never have, because you push everyone away." I took a slow, deep breath, letting his words wash over me without leaving a single mark. Jealous. That was the favorite family script. I was the dark-skinned, loud, difficult sister who was eternally bitter because I did not possess Chloe's light, bright privilege. Preston knew exactly what buttons to push because Valerie had handed him the instruction manual on a silver platter. He knew my mother favored Chloe's loose curls and fair skin, treating her like a delicate porcelain doll, while treating me like a beast of burden meant only to carry the family's heavy loads. He thought bringing up my supposed inferiority would break my composure. "You are just an angry, bitter dropout," Preston spat, stepping directly into my path and forcing me to finally stop. "You think because you wear a nice designer suit and rent a fancy corporate office space that you are somehow on my level. You are not. You are a community college dropout who got lucky playing real estate agent. I am a top-tier financial broker. I manage actual wealth. Do not play games with money you do not understand." The irony was so thick it was suffocating. He was standing in a commercial building that I owned, demanding access to millions of dollars that I earned while calling me a lucky dropout. He truly thought this entire floor was rented. He thought my immense wealth was a fluke. He thought the Harrington family trust was a magical pot of gold left behind by a grandfather who in reality died completely broke. He looked at me and saw nothing but his own prejudiced stereotypes. I looked at him then. I looked at the sweat dripping down his temple, the panicked twitch in his jaw, the sheer, unadulterated terror hiding behind his arrogant blue eyes. He was drowning in his own fraudulent schemes, and he thought screaming at the ocean would somehow save him. "Call your little manager friend," Preston ordered, pointing a trembling finger inches from my face. "Tell him to lift the freeze immediately. If you ruin this closing, Valerie will never forgive you. Chloe will never speak to you again. I will personally make sure you are entirely cut out of this family. I will have my firm's legal team bury you in so much litigation for tortious interference that you will be answering phones at a customer service call center by Christmas." He leaned in closer, dropping his voice to a menacing, venomous whisper, weaponizing every microaggression he could muster. "Stop acting like a stereotypical angry black woman throwing a tantrum because her sister is the beautiful, successful one. Fix the glitch, Zuri. Authorize the wire transfer, or I promise you I will destroy whatever pathetic little career you think you have built here." I stood perfectly still. The corporate hallway around us had gone dead silent. My executive assistant Maya stood a few feet away at her desk, her hand hovering over the phone ready to call building security. I caught her eye and gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of my head. I did not need security. I wanted Preston exactly where he was. He breathed heavily, waiting for me to crack. He expected tears of submission. He expected me to yell back to create a loud, messy scene that would validate his carefully constructed narrative that I was out of control and overly emotional. He expected me to cave under the heavy threat of losing my mother's conditional love, because for my entire life that specific threat had always worked. But I was no longer the little girl who used to beg for Valerie's approval. I was no longer the sister who accepted being hidden in the shadows so Chloe could soak up the sun. and I was absolutely never going to be intimidated by a mediocre, condescending man who was secretly drowning in massive, insurmountable debt. I slowly reached into my designer bag and pulled out my phone. Preston's tense shoulders visibly relaxed. A smug, victorious smirk began to form on his sweaty face. He thought he had won. He believed his aggressive posturing had put me back in my place. He adjusted his silk tie, clearing his throat, and preparing to return to his favorite role as the benevolent white savior patriarch of the Harrington family. "You are making the right choice, Zuri," he said, his tone dripping with patronizing approval and false warmth. "It takes a big person to admit when they are in over their head. Just dial the number and I will explain the complex transfer protocols to your guys so we can get this sorted out quickly before the sellers get spooked." I did not dial Marcus. I did not unlock my phone to authorize a wire transfer. Instead, I simply stepped around Preston, closing the final few feet between us and the heavy frosted glass doors of my corner office. I pushed the double doors open, revealing the sprawling sunlit executive suite that commanded a breathtaking panoramic view of the entire Atlanta skyline. I walked across the room, stepped behind my massive custom-cut marble desk, and set my bag down with a soft, definitive thud. Preston followed me inside, his smug smile faltering slightly as he took in the sheer scale and luxury of the room. The original modern art hanging on the walls, the expansive seating area, the undeniable aura of absolute uncompromising power. This was not the office of a lucky real estate agent. This was the throne room of a titan. I turned to face him, leaning casually against the edge of my marble desk. He stood awkwardly in the center of the room, looking suddenly very small and entirely out of place in his tight navy suit. The tension escalated rapidly, hanging heavy and suffocating in the air between us. The trap was fully sprung. The doors were closed, and it was finally time to show the golden boy exactly whose kingdom he was standing in. I stopped at the edge of my custom-cut marble desk and finally turned to face him. The frantic energy radiating off his body was practically visible. He was panting slightly, his face a blotchy, mottled crimson, his expensive navy suit looking suddenly cheap and unkempt against the backdrop of my immaculate executive suite. I remained perfectly still, letting the silence stretch until it became a physical weight in the room. I wanted him to feel the vast, terrifying difference in our power. He hated the silence. It forced him to hear the sound of his own desperation. "Are you completely finished?" I asked, my voice perfectly level, barely above a whisper yet, carrying easily across the cavernous room. He opened his mouth to shout another threat, but I raised a single manicured finger, pinning him to the spot. "Because before you threaten to ruin my pathetic little career again, I have a genuine question for you, Preston. It has been keeping me up at night." I leaned back casually against the cool marble, crossing my arms. "You are the golden boy, the financial prodigy, the man my mother parades around the country club as the brilliant, wealthy savior of the Harrington legacy. So tell me, why exactly does a top-tier financial broker need his black wife's family trust to cover a simple down payment on a house?" Preston scoffed, a harsh, jerky sound that lacked any real conviction. He adjusted his silk tie, attempting to physically inflate his chest and reclaim the space. "I am managing the family assets, Zuri. Valerie asked me to oversee the portfolio because she knows you lack the financial literacy to handle real capital. It is called liquidating stagnant assets to optimize a real estate acquisition. Not that I expect a college dropout to understand high-level market strategies." He took a step closer, his lip curling into a familiar, ugly sneer. He was falling back on his favorite defense mechanism, the one Valerie had allowed him to use for years. "This is not about my money. This is about you. You are so consumed by your own bitter jealousy over Chloe that you are trying to sabotage her happiness. You cannot stand looking at us and knowing you will never have what we have. Chloe deserves this house. She has the grace, the beauty, the light-skinned privilege that you have always resented. You are just an angry, dark, miserable woman trying to punish us for your own failures. Fix the banking error right now, Zuri, or I swear to God, I will have you removed from this family permanently." I let a slow, predatory smile spread across my face. I did not flinch at his insults. I did not raise my voice. I just looked at him with profound clinical pity. High-level market strategies. I repeated, tasting the absolute absurdity of the phrase. Is that what you are calling it now? Because 2 years ago, the Securities and Exchange Commission had a very different term for it. The remaining color drained completely from Preston's face. The smug sneer vanished in an instant, replaced by a hollow, terrified stare. He took a tiny, involuntary step backward, his polished leather shoes squeaking awkwardly against the hardwood floor. I have no idea what you are talking about, he stammered, his voice suddenly lacking any trace of its previous thunder. Do not insult my intelligence, I said, pushing off the desk and taking a slow, deliberate step toward him. You think because I do not attend your fancy country club dinners that I do not know exactly what happens in this city? You lost your Series 7 and Series 66 licenses 24 months ago. You took millions of dollars from your previous firm's elderly clients and dumped it into unregulated crypto portfolios that vanished overnight. You were quietly terminated, stripped of your credentials, and permanently barred from operating as a licensed financial broker anywhere in the United States. You are a fraud, Preston. A completely broke, legally blacklisted fraud. He was visibly shaking now. He looked frantically at the frosted glass doors behind him, terrified that my staff outside could hear his entire life being systematically dismantled. You are crazy, he whispered, his eyes wide and frantic. You are completely delusional. I work at Vanguard Financial. I am a senior consultant. I have high net worth clients. You have a desk, I corrected him sharply, cutting through his delusion like a knife. You have a desk at a boutique firm that Valerie's church friend owns, and they let you sit there and pretend to work while paying you a base salary that barely covers your monthly car lease. You have no clients, you have no fund, and as of this morning, you have absolutely no house. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The realization was hitting him in real time. And the most fascinating part of this entire pathetic saga, I continued, my voice dripping with cold disgust, is that my mother knew. Valerie knew her perfect affluent white son-in-law was entirely broke. But she could not bear the public humiliation. She could not walk into Sunday service and admit that Chloe married a criminal. The illusion of black excellence of the perfect, wealthy, blended family was far too important to her. So she covered for you. She paid your country club dues out of her own shrinking savings. She bought Chloe's designer bags, so everyone would think you were a great provider. She let you pretend to be a private wealth consultant just to keep the neighborhood gossips from tearing her apart. Preston wiped the sweat from his forehead with a trembling hand. You cannot prove any of this. I do not have to prove anything to the public, Preston. I only have to prove it to the bank. Which is exactly why I froze the trust. You forged financial documents to secure a shadow loan from private lenders, planning to use the Harrington Trust to wash the funds and cover your tracks. You tried to use my grandfather's name to launder your own massive debt. I took one final step forward, invading his personal space, forcing him to look down into the eyes of the woman he had underestimated his entire life. There is no banking error, Preston. There is no glitch. I am the trust. Every dollar you have spent, every meal you have eaten, every luxury car you drive has been funded by the bitter, angry college dropout you despise. And I just turned off the tap. Preston stared at me, his chest heaving as the reality of my words hung in the air. The red flush on his face deepened into a sickly, mottled purple. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then let out a sharp, breathless scoff. He shook his head violently, refusing to let his carefully constructed reality shatter. He planted his hands flat on the edge of my marble desk and leaned over it, trying to force his physical presence into my space. You are lying, he spat, his voice dropping to a guttural threat. You are bluffing. You do not have that kind of capital, and even if you did, you cannot just freeze a legally binding family trust. I will call Arthur right now. I will have the legal team at my firm draw up an injunction before lunch. We will have you completely removed from the family business. I will strip you of any administrative power you think you hold, and we will audit every single penny you have ever touched. I sank slowly into my high-backed leather executive chair. I leaned back, resting my elbows on the armrests and steepling my fingers beneath my chin. The camera of the moment captured the stark, undeniable contrast between us. From my position, he looked incredibly small. His expensive suit was straining at the seams, his posture rigid with a pathetic, desperate bravado. "Remove me from the family business," I repeated, letting the words roll around the quiet room. "Preston, you still do not grasp the fundamental concept of ownership. There is no family business. There is only my business. Valerie does not have a portfolio. Chloe does not have a trust fund. They have monthly allowances that I graciously provide to keep them from embarrassing themselves on a grand scale." "I will destroy you," he hissed, the veneer of the polite, wealthy son-in-law completely gone. "I am calling my firm. You are going to regret this." I let out a soft, genuine laugh. It bubbled up from my chest, clear and sharp, cutting through his hollow threats. I reached out and opened the single leather-bound folder resting on the center of my desk. I pulled out a crisp, heavy stock document and slid it across the smooth marble until it stopped right against his white knuckles. "Call them," I challenged, gesturing toward the paper. "But you might want to read the new corporate structuring agreement first." Preston looked down. His eyes scanned the bold text at the top of the page. I watched his pupils dart back and forth, reading the complex legal jargon. I watched the exact moment his brain comprehended the words. His hands began to tremble so violently that the paper vibrated against the desk. "Your boss Arthur is a terrible businessman," I stated, keeping my voice conversational and light. "He was bleeding capital for the last 4 quarters. His boutique firm was drowning in bad debt and toxic assets. 3 days ago, one of my subsidiary holding companies approached him with a lifeline. We offered a highly aggressive buyout. Arthur did not even hesitate. He took the cash signed over his voting rights and stepped down." Preston looked up at me, his eyes wide with a terror so profound it almost looked like physical pain. The arrogant white knight was evaporating before my eyes, leaving behind a terrified con artist. "I did not just freeze the trust, Preston," I said, leaning forward, closing the distance between us. "I bought a 51% controlling stake in your brokerage firm. I own it. Which means I do not just own the building you are standing in. I own the company you pretend to work for." He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. "Zuri, wait. Listen to me. Arthur was very cooperative during the acquisition." I continued, deliberately ignoring his plea. "He handed over the complete employment roster. Imagine my surprise when I found your name listed under administrative consultant rather than senior broker. A base salary of $45,000 a year. No commission structure. No client roster. You are basically a glorified receptionist fetching coffee for the actual partners, all so you could tell my mother you worked in private wealth." "We can fix this," he stammered, stepping back from the desk, his hands raised defensively. "I can explain the loan. I can pay it back. Do not do this. Chloe is pregnant." "You used her!" I snapped, my voice finally cracking like a whip, shattering the quiet of the office. "You used my sister's desperation for a picture-perfect life to hide your own spectacular failures. You sat at my mother's dining table eating food I paid for, looking down your nose at me. You called me an angry, bitter dropout. You let them treat me like the embarrassing, dark-skinned secret while you paraded around as their savior. You thought you were so much smarter than us simply because of the color of your skin and the cut of your suit." I pressed a small silver button under the lip of my desk. "Your employment at the firm is terminated, effective immediately," I stated, my tone returning to an absolute freezing calm. "Your keycard is already deactivated. Your corporate email is locked. Your severance package is 0. "You cannot do this to me," Preston screamed, the sound tearing from his throat in a raw, animalistic panic. He lunged forward, slamming his fists against the desk. "I will ruin you. I will go to the press. I will tell everyone how you treat your own family. You are nothing but a ghetto trash interloper playing dress-up in a corporate tower." The heavy frosted glass doors behind him swung open. My executive assistant Maya stood on the threshold, her face a mask of total professional indifference. Flanking her were 2 massive security guards in dark tactical suits. "Mr. Sterling is leaving," I told the guards, not taking my eyes off Preston. "He is permanently banned from this building and all affiliated corporate properties." The guards moved with terrifying efficient speed. They grabbed Preston by the arms, hauling him backward away from my desk. He thrashed wildly, his expensive leather shoes scrambling for purchase on the smooth floor. Zuri, please, he begged, the racial slurs and threats instantly vanishing into pathetic, humiliating sobs. Please, I need that job. I owe the lenders. They are going to kill me. Zuri. Take him to the freight elevator. I instructed the guards, waving my hand dismissively. I do not want him upsetting the actual clients in the main lobby. You bitch! He roared, his voice cracking as they dragged him out the doors. You miserable, arrogant bitch! Chloe will hate you. Valerie will disown you. His screams echoed down the long corporate hallway, growing fainter as the guards manhandled him toward the service elevators. I stood up, walked over to the heavy glass doors, and gently pulled them shut, cutting off the noise completely. The silence returned to my office, thick and golden. I walked back to my desk, picked up my espresso cup, and looked out over the city. The afternoon sun glares off the hood of my matte black SUV as I merge onto the bustling Atlanta interstate. The world outside is a chaotic blur of rush-hour traffic and blinding light, but inside the cabin of my vehicle, it is a fortress of absolute silence. Through the reinforced windshield, my reflection is perfectly still. My hands rest lightly on the leather steering wheel. My breathing is slow, measured, and entirely calm. I am a woman who has just amputated a diseased limb, and I feel nothing but the profound relief of the dead weight falling away. The digital display on my dashboard flashes a bright, angry red. The ringing tones of the incoming call echo through the premium surround sound speakers, shattering the quiet sanctuary of the car. The caller ID displays a single word. Valerie. I let it ring 3 times. I want her to feel the stretch of seconds to let her anxiety marinate. On the 4th ring, I tap the screen. You vindictive, miserable little girl, Valerie breathes into the phone. Her voice is a razor blade wrapped in velvet, trembling with a rage so deep it sounds like it is tearing her throat apart. She does not ask what happened. She does not ask for my side of the story. She leaps straight into the execution, wielding her maternal authority like a blunt instrument. I keep my eyes on the road ahead, watching the brake lights of the cars in front of me. I say nothing. Preston just walked through the front door of my house looking like a broken man. Valerie continues, her volume rising with every word. He is hyperventilating. Chloe is upstairs sobbing so hard, I am terrified she is going to go into premature labor. The title agency called 5 minutes ago to officially cancel the closing on the Buckhead estate. The sellers are threatening to keep the earnest money and sue us for fraud. You have destroyed your sister's life out of pure, unadulterated spite. You should ask Preston why he needed to forge financial documents to buy a house he cannot afford. I say, my voice carrying the cool, detached tone of a stranger. Do not you dare lie to me, Zuri. Valerie shrieks, the polished country club facade cracking completely. Preston told me exactly what you did. He told me you used illegal corporate loopholes to freeze the family trust just to humiliate him. He told me you threw a violent, screaming tantrum in front of his colleagues and had him thrown out of a building because you are so consumed by jealousy. You could not stand the thought of Chloe getting that magnificent house. You could not stomach looking at her perfect marriage and knowing that a high-value man like Preston would never look twice at someone as dark and bitter as you. I tap my manicured nail against the steering wheel. The delusion is staggering. Preston ran home to his mother-in-law and spun a fairy tale where he was the victim of an angry black woman's wrath. He did not tell her that I owned the firm. He did not tell her that he was a glorified receptionist who had been stripped of his broker's license. He was still lying, and Valerie was swallowing it whole because it fit perfectly into the narrative she had spent my entire life writing. I am not discussing this with you over the phone, I state flatly. You are right, we are not. Valerie snaps back, her tone shifting from hysterical anger to a cold, terrifying authority. Because you are coming to this house right now. I will not allow the devil to establish a foothold in my family. I will not allow your dark, envious spirit to ruin what we have built. I take a slow turn onto the exit ramp, my face impassive. What exactly are you planning, Valerie? I have called Pastor Miller, she announces, her voice swelling with religious righteousness. I have called Elder Thomas and Sister Jenkins. They are on their way to my house right now. We are holding an intervention, Zuri. You are going to walk through my front doors. You are going to get down on your knees in my living room, and you are going to beg your sister and her husband for forgiveness in front of the church elders. You are going to repent for the jealousy in your heart, and then you are going to immediately release the hold on that trust account so Preston can save this real estate deal. I let the sheer audacity of her demand wash over me. An intervention, a public shaming masquerading as spiritual guidance. Valerie knew that she could no longer control me with just her voice, so she was summoning the heavy artillery. She was bringing in the very people she spent her entire life trying to impress, intending to use the immense weight of the congregation's judgment to bully me into submission. She thought the threat of public embarrassment in front of her high society church circle would force me to open my checkbook and save her precious white son-in-law. She was handing me the match and pointing me directly toward the gasoline. Zuri, do you hear me? Valerie demands, her breath hitching with impatience. You will be at this house by 8 o'clock tonight, or I swear to God, you will never be welcome in this family again. I will make sure every single person in our community knows exactly what kind of monster you are. I glance down at the passenger seat. Resting on the pristine black leather is a thick, heavy portfolio. Inside are the original documents for the Harrington Family Trust proving my sole ownership. Inside are the termination papers for Preston Sterling explicitly detailing his $45,000 salary and total lack of brokerage credentials. Inside are the bank statements showing every single transfer I made to cover Valerie's luxury car leases and country club dues. And tucked neatly at the very back of the folder is the original deed to the sprawling multi-million-dollar estate Valerie currently lives in. The deed registered to my private holding company. I look back up at the road, a slow, dangerous smile finally breaking across my face. I hear you perfectly, Valerie. I say, my voice smooth as glass. Tell Pastor Miller and the elders to make themselves comfortable. I will be there at 8 o'clock sharp. I tap the screen, ending the call before she can say another word. The silence floods back into the car, thick and heavy with anticipation. I press my foot down on the accelerator, the powerful engine roaring to life as I merge onto the road leading toward the suburbs. They want an intervention. They want to air out the family sins in front of an audience. They want a spectacular public reckoning. I am more than happy to give them exactly what they asked for. The heavy oak double doors of the Buckhead estate yield immediately to the sharp thrust of my heel. I stride into the grand foyer, the invisible camera of my reality gliding smoothly behind me, tracking my every movement. I do not knock. I do not wait to be announced by the housekeeper. I own the very ground I am walking on, even if the people inside the house do not know it yet. My heels click with a lethal rhythmic precision against the imported Italian marble, announcing my arrival like a ticking clock. I round the corner into the formal living room. The space is a masterclass in performative wealth, overflowing with cream-colored silk upholstery, crystal vases, and strategically placed religious texts. My gaze sweeps across the room, panning over the faces of my waiting tribunal. Valerie sits rigidly in the center of the largest sofa, wearing a pearl-colored St. John knit suit that she likely bought specifically for this occasion. Beside her sits my sister Chloe. She is dressed in soft pastel maternity wear, looking intentionally fragile, clutching a lace handkerchief in one hand while the other rests protectively over her slightly swollen stomach. Flanking them in the matching wingback chairs are Sister Jenkins and Sister Abernathy, the two most notorious gossips from Valerie's megachurch. They sit with their Bibles resting on their laps, their faces pinched into identical expressions of rehearsed judgmental sorrow. The trap has been set. The audience is in place. Valerie stands the moment I enter. She squares her shoulders, lifting her chin to look down her nose at me. The prodigal daughter finally graces us with her presence, Valerie announces. Her voice carries the practiced booming cadence of a televangelist delivering a sermon. You have let the devil take root in your heart, Zuri. We have gathered here today because you are spiritually sick. You are consumed by a dark, envious spirit that is tearing this family apart. Sister Jenkins nods fervently, her elaborate church hat bobbing. Amen, she whispers, clutching her Bible tighter. Sister Abernathy murmurs her agreement, her eyes burning holes into my tailored emerald suit. Valerie steps forward, pointing a manicured finger directly at my chest. I raised you to know the Lord Zuri. I raised you to celebrate your sister's blessings, not to covet them. You have allowed your bitter jealousy over Chloe's beautiful life to turn you into a monster. Preston is fighting tooth and nail to provide for his growing family, and you are using deceitful corporate tricks to sabotage his closing. You will get down on your knees right now in the center of this room. You will beg your sister for forgiveness. You will repent to these elders, and then you will fix the financial mess you created. I do not blink. I do not shrink away from her pointed finger. I simply stand there, an immovable object against her wave of weaponized religion. Seeing that her mother's sermon has not broken my composure, Chloe decides it is time to deploy her own arsenal. She lets out a sudden breathy sob that sounds entirely practiced. She leans forward on the silk cushions, tears welling in her large light eyes. "How could you be so vicious?" Zuri Chloe cries, her voice trembling with theatrical fragility. Preston is a good man. He is a brilliant provider. He worked so hard to secure that beautiful house for us. He just wanted to give his child a perfect home. She strokes her pregnant belly, making sure the church aunties are watching her maternal distress. You are trying to make a pregnant woman homeless just because you are miserable and alone, Chloe wails, dabbing at her perfectly dry eyes with the handkerchief. You cannot stand that Preston chose me. You cannot stand that I have the life you desperately want. Do you have any idea what this kind of severe emotional stress is doing to my baby? The doctor said I need to stay calm, and here you are trying to destroy my family out of pure spite. I am terrified, Zuri. I am terrified of my own sister. Sister Abernathy gasps in synchronized horror, reaching over to pat Chloe's knee consolingly. It is a tragedy, the older woman mutters, glaring at me. To attack a mother-to-be. It is downright wicked. Valerie crosses her arms, looking at me with absolute disgust. You heard your sister. You are endangering my grandchild. I will not tolerate this toxic behavior in my house for one more second. You will undo whatever hold you placed on Preston's accounts, or you will leave and never come back. You will be dead to us, Zuri. The air in the room is suffocating thick with their shared delusion and decades of unchecked entitlement. They have written the script, assigned the roles, and memorized their lines. I am the jealous, dark-skinned antagonist, and they are the righteous, aggrieved victims. They expect me to crack under the combined weight of maternal rejection, religious guilt, and the sacred shield of Chloe's pregnancy. Instead, I let out a low, rich laugh. The sound cuts through the heavy, pious atmosphere like a blade. Chloe's theatrical sobbing hitches, stopping instantly. Valerie's eyes widen in genuine shock. The two church aunties freeze their Bibles, slipping slightly on their laps. They are completely unequipped to handle a target who refuses to play the victim. I walk slowly across the priceless Persian rug, closing the distance between us. I do not stop until I am standing directly in front of the heavy mahogany coffee table that separates me from my mother and sister. I look down at them, my expression devoid of any anger or sorrow. There is only cold, clinical precision. I lift the thick, heavy leather portfolio I have been carrying under my arm. I raise it slightly, ensuring every pair of eyes in the room is locked onto it. Then I drop it directly onto the glass center of the coffee table. The heavy, resonant thud echoes loudly through the vaulted ceiling of the living room. It sounds exactly like a gavel coming down to deliver a final sentence. You want to talk about protecting this family, I say, my voice dropping to a smooth, dangerous register. You want to talk about my jealousy, Preston's brilliance, and the sanctity of this house. Fine. Let us have a completely honest intervention. I reach out and rest my hand flat against the cool leather of the portfolio, my eyes locking onto Valerie's terrified stare. I am about to burn their entire fairy tale to the ground, and I am going to make sure the church elders have front row seats to the inferno. Valerie stares at the heavy leather portfolio resting on the glass coffee table. For a fraction of a second, the polished, righteous indignation falters, replaced by a flicker of genuine uncertainty. But Valerie has spent a lifetime constructing her reality, and she refuses to let a single prop dismantle it. She squares her shoulders, puffing her chest out as she steps closer to the table looming over it. The physical space between us seems to shrink, the atmosphere pulling so taut that the cavernous living room suddenly feels claustrophobic. My gaze remains locked entirely onto her face, unblinking, tracking every minute twitch of her facial muscles. "What is this nonsense, Zuri?" Valerie demands, her voice dropping into a harsh, venomous register. "Another one of your dramatic stunts. Do you think throwing a folder on my table is going to absolve you in the eyes of the Lord?" I do not move. I do not speak. I let the silence hang heavy and suffocating, forcing her to fill the void. "You have always been exactly like this." Valerie hisses, her upper lip curling into an ugly sneer. She leans closer, invading my space, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. "Since the day you were born, you could never just be grateful. You could never just be happy with your place. You were always too loud. You were always too angry. You have always been far too difficult." She gestures sharply toward Chloe, who is still performing her fragile, tearful act on the sofa. "Look at your sister. Look at her. Chloe has grace. Chloe has charm. She has the kind of light, beautiful spirit that draws people in. People look at Chloe and they see a blessing. But you—" Valerie leans in even closer, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only to wound. "People look at you, and they see a dark, bitter storm cloud. You have always been too dark, Zuri. Too dark on the outside, and too dark on the inside. You resent Chloe's lightness. You resent her beauty. You resent the fact that you will never ever fit into the circles we belong in, no matter how much money you pretend to have. You are a miserable, difficult girl who would rather tear her own family down than admit her own shortcomings." Sister Jenkins lets out a soft, validating hum from her chair. "A tragic spirit," she mutters under her breath, shaking her head. I absorb the blow perfectly. The racial venom, the blatant colorism, the lifelong scapegoating, it hits me exactly as she intended, but it does not leave a mark. Instead of crying, instead of screaming, I lean forward. The proximity is suffocating, our faces only inches apart. "Too difficult." I repeat, my voice barely above a whisper, yet slicing through the room with surgical precision. "Yes, too difficult." Valerie spits back, her eyes blazing with self-righteous fury. "You dropped out of college just to humiliate me. You refused to apply yourself. You chose to be a failure because it was easier than actually doing the work." I place my hand flat on the cover of the leather portfolio. "Just like I was too difficult when you stole my college fund to pay for Chloe's failed boutique." The words land like a grenade in the center of the room. Behind Valerie, Sister Abernathy loudly gasps, her hand flying up to cover her mouth. Sister Jenkins drops her Bible. It hits the Persian rug with a soft, heavy thud that sounds like a gunshot in the sudden, absolute silence. Stealing an inheritance, especially from one's own child, is a cardinal sin in their social circles, a scandal that cannot be prayed away. "Lies!" Valerie croaks, all the color instantly draining from her perfectly made-up face. She takes a staggering step backward, her hand blindly reaching for the edge of the sofa to steady herself. "You are a liar." I flip the heavy leather cover open. I bypass the corporate acquisitions and the employment terminations. I pull out a stack of banking records, the pages crisp and highlighted in bright yellow ink. Grandpa Harrington left 2 identical educational trust accounts when he passed away. I state, my voice ringing out clear and authoritative, making sure the church elders hear every single syllable. One for Chloe, one for me. I was 18 years old. I trusted my mother to manage the account until I graduated. But during the fall semester of my sophomore year, my tuition check bounced. I was called into the university bursar's office and told I was being officially unenrolled for non-payment. I take a slow step toward my mother, holding the documents up. I came home crying. I continue staring directly into Valerie's terrified eyes. I thought there had been a terrible banking error, and you, Valerie, sat me down in this very room. You looked me right in the eye and told me the stock market had crashed. You told me the investments my grandfather made had failed and the money was completely gone. You told me I had to drop out and get a job because the family simply could not afford to keep me in school. Valerie opens her mouth, but her throat works silently. She has no sermon for this. But the market did not crash, did it? I ask. Stepping closer, holding the highlighted bank transfer confirmation directly in front of her face. You liquidated my entire educational trust, $250,000, and you wired every single penny of it into a newly formed LLC registered to Chloe Harrington. Chloe lets out a strangled gasp, pressing herself backward into the cushions as if trying to merge with the upholstery. You stole my future, I say, my voice dripping with absolute disgust. You drained my inheritance so your golden light-skinned daughter could open a luxury bridal boutique in Midtown. A vanity project that went bankrupt exactly 11 months later because she spent the capital on designer inventory and vanity parties. It was a family investment! Valerie stammers, her voice shrill and desperate, as she glances frantically at the two church elders. Chloe had a vision. She had a business plan. She was making important connections for this family. You were just taking useless art and history classes. It was a reallocation of resources for the greater good of the Harrington name. It was felony wire fraud, I correct her sharply, snapping the documents back into my hand. You stole my money to fund her delusion, and when she bankrupted the business, you branded me a lazy college dropout to cover your tracks. You let me work 3 minimum wage jobs. You let me sleep on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment. You let these women, I gesture sharply toward the wide-eyed church aunties, pray for my lost rebellious soul every single Sunday, while you sat in the front pew wearing designer clothes bought with my stolen tuition money. Chloe shakes her head, tears streaming down her face, the fragile act completely abandoned for genuine panic. Zuri, I did not know. I swear to you I did not know where the money came from. Mom told me it was a business loan from the bank. I did not know she took it from you. I turned my gaze to my sister, offering her no mercy. Your signature is on the transfer authorization documents, Chloe. You knew exactly whose account it originated from. You saw my name on the wire transfer, but you did not care. You signed it anyway because you have been trained since birth to believe that everything I have inherently belongs to you. Valerie steps forward, trying to physically block my line of sight to her favored child. You will not speak to us this way in my house, she shouts, her voice cracking with desperation. I look at her, a slow, predatory smile returning to my face. The trap has fully closed, and it is time to turn the lock. I do not reach for my phone. I do not look at the pastor, nor do I look at the judgmental sisters who have spent the last 10 minutes nodding in fervent agreement with Valerie's delusional sermon. Instead, I reach into the pocket of my blazer, retrieve my smartphone, and tap a single command. The massive high-definition smart television mounted above the fireplace blinks to life. The living room goes quiet, the hum of the central air conditioning suddenly the loudest sound in the house. Valerie scoffs, her hands resting defiantly on her hips. Do you think a slideshow of your pathetic work projects is going to distract us from your sin? I do not answer her. I look at Chloe. My sister is still holding that lace handkerchief to her eyes, though she has stopped the frantic sobbing, sensing the sudden shift in the air. Her eyes flicker to the screen, then back to me, an expression of growing confusion masking her face. This is not a slideshow, I say, my voice steady, carrying the weight of a final judgment. This is a reminder. I press play. The high-quality footage from my office security system floods the room. The audio is crisp, captured by the conference room microphones. On the screen, the image of Preston appears. He is slumped in the chair exactly where he was sitting a few hours ago. He is not the arrogant suit-wearing broker anymore. He is a man stripped bare by his own incompetence. He is sobbing, his face blotchy and unkempt, his composure completely destroyed. I did not mean for it to happen, Zuri, he is saying on the screen, his voice cracking with a high-pitched, desperate whine. I was up 60% on the first round of the leveraged position. I thought I could double it. I thought I could finally be the man Valerie thinks I am. I just needed the down payment money to make the trade work. I was going to pay it back before the audit. I swear I was going to pay it back. In the living room, Chloe lets out a sharp, ragged gasp. She drops the handkerchief, her hands flying to her mouth. I am a fraud. Preston's voice continues to echo through the surround sound system, filling every corner of the mansion. I have no clients. I have no fund. I have been sitting at that desk for 2 years, pretending to move millions, while I drown in debt, to the shadow lenders. If you freeze the trust, they will kill me. Please, Zuri, please, do not tell Chloe. If she finds out I am broke, she will leave me. Please. The screen shows him physically groveling, his forehead pressed against the edge of my marble desk, his entire body shaking with the force of his misery. The silence in the room is now absolute, heavy, and lethal. Sister Jenkins has gone deathly pale, her mouth agape as she watches the man who just moments ago was the brilliant provider dissolve into a pathetic, weeping wreck. Sister Abernathy is staring at the screen with an expression of pure, unadulterated shock, her Bible forgotten on the rug. Valerie is the one who cracks first. Her face, which had been a mask of righteous fury, has collapsed. She looks at the screen, then at Chloe, then back at the screen, her eyes darting around, as if searching for a way to delete the reality of what she is seeing. "This is a deep fake," Valerie shouts the word, sounding hysterical. "This is a digital fabrication, Zuri. You have always been good with computers. You have always been the tech-obsessed one. You did this to frame him." I calmly stop the video, the image of Preston's tear-streaked face frozen on the television. "It is 4K resolution. Valerie." I say, my voice devoid of emotion. "It is time-stamped. It was recorded in my office, which is equipped with professional-grade security software. I have the metadata. I have the sworn statement from my IT director who verified the file's integrity this morning." I turn to look at Chloe. My sister is physically trembling. Her face has lost all of its practiced porcelain beauty, replaced by the ugly, raw shock of a woman who just realized her entire foundation is made of sand. "Is it true, Chloe?" I ask, my voice dropping to a gentle, lethal softness. "Is that the man you were just claiming was a brilliant provider? Is that the man you were just crying about, asking me to give your family another down payment?" Chloe's chest heaves. She looks at her mother, her eyes wide, desperate for a lie, for a script, for anything to tell her this isn't real. But Valerie has no words. The matriarch is staring at the screen, the reality of her broken reputation dawning on her in real time. She had staked her social standing on the illusion of Preston Sterling, and that illusion had just been executed on her living room wall. "It is a fabrication!" Valerie gasps again, though her voice lacks all conviction. "It has to be." I pull a second document from the portfolio and place it on the table. It is an official inquiry from the SEC regarding the shadow lending operations of the boutique firm Preston works for. That is the formal notice from the Securities and Exchange Commission, I tell the room. They are investigating the firm as we speak. Because Preston forged the trust's signature to secure those shadow loans, the investigation is going to lead them directly to this house. They are going to audit the trust. They are going to audit the family bank accounts. They are going to discover that my tuition money paid for your boutique, and that my trust fund has been paying for the country club dues for the last decade. Valerie stands frozen, her hand covering her mouth. "You called the church elders here to judge me for being difficult," I say, pacing the perimeter of the coffee table, letting my gaze drift over the terrified guests. "But I think they are going to have a much more difficult time explaining to the congregation why the Harrington legacy is currently being liquidated to pay off my brother-in-law's criminal debt to unregulated crypto exchanges." I stop in front of Chloe. She looks small, hunched over, her hands still resting on her stomach. "You aren't homeless because of me, Chloe," I say, my voice clear and cold. "You are homeless because you married a man who never had a cent to his name, and because you were too busy looking down at me to realize you were the one being conned." I turn back to Valerie. The two church aunties are already standing up, their faces tight with embarrassment, and more importantly, the instinct to distance themselves from a scandal that is clearly going to make the evening news. "We should go," Sister Jenkins mutters, her voice trembling. "We did not know about this. We were not told about criminal investigations." Valerie tries to grab her arm, but the older woman pulls away, as if Valerie's knit suit were covered in lice. "We will be praying for your situation," Sister Jenkins adds, her eyes avoiding the television screen entirely, "but we have no place in this." Within 90 seconds, the living room is empty of the church elders. They have fled, sensing the stench of a sinking ship. I walk over to the remote, click it, and turn the television off. The screen goes black, reflecting the room back to us. Now that we have dispensed with the sermon, I say, turning back to my mother and sister, "Let's talk about that Buckhead estate. I've already contacted the sellers. I've notified them that the deal is off due to fraudulent documentation. I've also instructed my legal team to initiate an eviction notice for this house. Valerie's head snaps up, her eyes wide. You wouldn't. This is my home. You don't have a home, Valerie, I correct her. You have a residence you are currently occupying by the grace of my holding company. And as of tonight, that grace has officially expired. I walk toward the foyer, my work here done. I don't look back as I leave. I don't need to. The sound of Chloe's fresh, genuine sobs, unscripted and terrified this time, follows me out the door. It is the sweetest sound I have ever heard. I step out onto the grand portico, the heavy oak doors closing behind me. The crisp evening air fills my lungs, a stark contrast to the suffocating delusion I have just escaped. It is the sweetest sound I have ever heard. But my exit is prematurely interrupted. Before I can even reach the bottom of the sweeping stone staircase, a black luxury SUV comes tearing up the circular driveway. The tires crush the manicured gravel, screeching to a halt directly in front of me. The driver's side door flies open, and Preston stumbles out. He looks entirely unhinged. His expensive tailored suit is wrinkled, his tie is pulled loose, and a sheen of frantic sweat coats his forehead. He freezes the moment he spots me standing on the steps, his eyes darting toward the heavy mahogany doors of the estate. You told them, Preston chokes out, his voice barely a rasp. I did. I reply smoothly, stepping down to meet him on the driveway. And they took it exactly as well as you would expect. He grabs the side of his vehicle, his knuckles white. I can fix this, Zuri. I just need a bridge loan. I just need you to front the capital until the market corrects. You have the money. You can save this family. I look at him with absolute pity. You still think this is about money, Preston? You still think you can buy your way out of the truth? Before he can beg further, the front doors of the mansion swing violently open. I turn to see Sister Jenkins and Sister Abernathy standing in the threshold. They had been trying to flee the scandal, desperate to escape the fallout of the SEC investigation I had just exposed. But the moment they see Preston standing in the driveway, their retreat halts. The scent of fresh, unfolding tragedy is simply too intoxicating for them to ignore. They linger in the doorway, clutching their designer handbags, their eyes wide with morbid anticipation. Right behind them, Chloe appears. Her face is a ruined masterpiece of smeared mascara and raw devastation. She pushes past the church elders marching out onto the portico. She looks down at her husband, the man she has paraded around as her perfect prize for years. Chloe lets out a guttural, furious scream. She descends the steps and lunges directly at Preston. Her fists fly, striking his chest and shoulders in a flurry of uncoordinated, desperate blows. You lost our house, Chloe shrieks, her voice cracking under the strain of absolute hysteria. You gambled my future on cryptocurrency. You told me we were closing on the estate tomorrow. You told me we were secure. Preston scrambles backward, trying to catch her flailing hands. Chloe, baby, stop. Listen to me. It is a temporary liquidity issue. The market dipped. I was trying to secure a better return for our family. I can fix it. I just need a few weeks. He glances pleadingly at me silently, begging me to intervene to offer the financial lifeline he so desperately needs. I do not oblige him. I walk back up the steps, moving past the struggling couple, and step right back into the grand foyer. The invisible camera of my reality executes a dynamic orbit, sweeping around the chaotic scene outside before pushing in tight on my figure. I remain perfectly still in the center of the frame, the untouchable core of this escalating storm. Valerie has finally emerged from the living room. She stands in the entryway, looking like a ghost haunting her own mansion. The flawless matriarch is trembling, her pristine image fractured beyond repair. You have ruined us, Valerie whispers, staring at me with hollow, defeated eyes. You came here and you destroyed this family. I am not finished. I state, my voice dropping the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. I reach into the heavy leather portfolio I am still carrying. I pull out a fresh stack of documents, these ones printed on heavy stock paper, bearing the unmistakable crest of Valerie's mega church. I hold them up, ensuring the two church elders standing nearby get a clear, unobstructed view of the seal. Sister Jenkins. Sister Abernathy. I say my tone commanding and absolute. I highly recommend you step back inside. You are going to want to see this. The elders do not hesitate. The mention of their church draws them back into the foyer, like moths to a flame. Outside, Preston manages to calm Chloe just enough to guide her back up the steps and into the house. They stumble into the entryway, a pathetic weeping mess of a couple. The doors close behind them, sealing us all inside this pressure cooker of revelation. I do not let them breathe. I do not give them a single second to process the previous devastation before I drop the next bomb. Preston did not just lose the down payment in a bad crypto trade, I announce, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. When the margin calls hit, his accounts were frozen. He panicked. He needed liquid cash immediately to hide his losses from his firm. So he turned to the one place where he had unchecked, unmonitored access to capital. I turned my gaze directly to the church aunties. He accessed the church's community charity fund, the same fund Valerie appointed him to manage last year. Sister Jenkins lets out a sharp, horrified gasp, clutching her chest. The charity fund. That money is for the community food bank. That is sacred money. It was, I correct her clinically. Preston drained $45,000 from the outreach account 3 weeks ago. Valerie staggers backward, hitting the wall. Preston, no! She breathes, her voice barely audible. Tell me you did not steal from the church. Tell me you did not steal from God. Preston is sweating profusely, shaking his head in rapid, frantic denial. It was a bridge loan. I was going to replace it before the quarterly audit. The market just did not bounce back in time. I swear, Valerie, I was going to put it back. But you did not put the church funds into the market. Did you, Preston? I interrupt, smoothly cutting through his desperate lies. I separate a specific document from the stack and drop it onto the marble console table. This is a copy of a residential lease agreement, I state, ensuring every person in the room hears the details. Preston used the church's charity money to pay a full year's lease up front on a luxury apartment in Midtown, an apartment registered to a 24-year-old Pilates instructor named Amber. The silence that follows is absolute and deafening. Chloe stops crying entirely. Her tear-streaked face goes completely slack as she stares in mute horror at her husband. Amber. Chloe whispers the name sounding foreign on her tongue. The apartment is strictly in her name. I continue relentlessly, but the building's security logs show Preston visiting 3 times a week. The dates of his visits align perfectly with the nights he claimed to be working late to secure your new house. He stole from the church collection plate to fund a secret apartment for his mistress. The church elders erupt. The pious restraint they had maintained all evening vanishes, replaced by a righteous, unholy fury. Sister Abernathy snatches the lease agreement off the table, her eyes scanning the highlighted lines. You wicked, deceitful serpent! Sister Abernathy screams, stepping aggressively toward Preston. You stole money meant for starving children to finance your adultery. You have brought shame upon the congregation. You have brought the devil into the house of the Lord. Sister Jenkins is already pulling her smartphone from her purse, her fingers flying across the screen. I am calling Pastor Thomas immediately. The Board of Trustees must be notified. We are calling the police. You are going to rot in a federal prison, Preston Sterling. Preston drops to his knees on the marble floor. He reaches out for Chloe, his hands grasping at the hem of her pastel maternity dress. Chloe, please. It meant nothing. She meant nothing. I love you. I love our family. Chloe looks down at him, her eyes wide with a revulsion so deep it seems to hollow her out from the inside. She takes a slow step backward, pulling her dress from his grip. She looks at her mother, but Valerie is entirely unresponsive, staring blankly at the wall as her social empire turns to ash. You disgust me, Chloe whispers, her voice dead and flat. I stand perfectly still in the center of the foyer, watching the total annihilation of the Harrington family facade. They had demanded I get down on my knees and repent for the sin of being successful. They had weaponized my race, my past, and my independence. Now they are drowning in the very deception they tried to project onto me. I turn and walk out the front door, leaving them to the wolves. Zuri, wait. The shrill, desperate shriek shatters the momentary quiet of the night air. The heavy mahogany door shudders violently as Valerie throws her weight against it, bursting out onto the grand stone portico just as my heel hits the top step. I resume my slow, measured stride. The invisible camera tracks steadily backward, gliding down the sweeping staircase, keeping my face perfectly centered in the frame. Behind me, the pristine facade of the Harrington family is actively tearing itself apart. Through the open doorway, the grand foyer has descended into absolute anarchy. I can hear the violent, echoing crash of a crystal vase smashing against the imported marble. Chloe is screaming a raw, primal sound, entirely devoid of her usual manufactured grace, while Preston shouts frantic, overlapping excuses that blur into pathetic white noise. The two church elders are practically vibrating with scandalous delight. They stand just inside the threshold, ignoring the brawl entirely, their thumbs flying across their smartphone screens as they broadcast the Harrington family's catastrophic ruin to the entire congregation. It is a symphony of pure, unadulterated destruction. I am the calm, silent eye of the hurricane, untouched by the flying debris. Valerie practically trips over her own expensive heels as she rushes down the steps to intercept me. She grabs my forearm, her manicured fingers digging into the fabric of my emerald suit with a frantic, bruising grip. "You cannot just walk away!" Valerie gasps, her chest heaving as she struggles to catch her breath. Her perfectly coiffed hair is unraveling strands clinging to the sweat on her forehead. "You have to fix this, Zuri. You have the capital. Write a check to the outreach fund right now. Pay the $45,000 back to the church before Pastor Thomas sees those text messages." I stop. I look down at her hand gripping my arm, then slowly raise my gaze to meet her wide, bloodshot eyes. I let the sheer absurdity of her demand hang in the cold night air. "Your son-in-law has just been exposed for embezzling charity funds to finance a luxury apartment for a 24-year-old Pilates instructor," I state, my voice dropping to a low clinical register. "Your pregnant daughter is currently tearing apart the foyer because her marriage is a fraudulent nightmare. And your only concern, Valerie, is covering the stolen church funds so you do not lose your seat on the Sunday planning committee." Valerie's grip tightens. She shakes my arm, completely blind to her own staggering narcissism. "Chloe's marriage is Chloe's problem," Valerie hisses, her true venomous nature fully unmasked. "Men make mistakes. She will deal with it. But the Harrington name is my legacy. I will not be a pariah in my own congregation. I will not let those gossiping hags run me out of my own church. You are going to write that check, Zuri. You owe this family." I smoothly rip my arm out of her grasp. "I do not owe you a single breath, Valerie." I reach into my designer bag, bypassing my car keys, and retrieve a thick, legally bound document folded into a crisp manila envelope. I hold it out, slapping the heavy paper directly against her chest. Valerie takes it reflexively, her eyes darting down to the bold black lettering printed across the top of the first page. "What is this?" she demands, her voice trembling as she reads the legal header. "It is a formal notice to vacate the premises." I reply, my tone as casual as if I were discussing the weather. "It is an eviction notice." Valerie stares at the paper, then lets out a harsh, disbelieving laugh. "You are delusional. You cannot evict me from my own house. I own this estate. Your father and I built this property." "You lost this property 3 years ago," I correct her, my words landing with the precision of a sniper rifle. "Did you really think no one would notice when you defaulted on the mortgage? You spent a decade quietly draining my father's estate to fund your country club dues, your designer wardrobe, and Chloe's endless string of failed vanity projects. 3 years ago, the bank initiated foreclosure proceedings. You were 60 days away from having your precious belongings thrown onto the curb by the county sheriff." The remaining color instantly drains from Valerie's face. She opens her mouth, but the arrogant defense she usually wields has completely vanished. "You thought you negotiated a miraculous refinancing deal at the 11th hour?" I continue, stepping closer, backing her up against the stone railing of the portico. "You bragged to all your friends about your brilliant financial acumen. You told everyone how you cleverly restructured the debt. But there was no restructuring, Valerie. A private holding company stepped in and purchased the debt, paying off the bank and acquiring the deed to this estate in full. Valerie looks down at the document in her hands, her eyes scanning the name of the holding company listed as the property owner. I own that holding company, I state, claiming my victory with absolute glacial calm. I bought this mansion out of foreclosure to save you from the public humiliation you so deeply fear. I own the roof over your head. I own the marble floors Chloe is currently crying on. You are not the matriarch of a sprawling estate, Valerie. You are my tenant. You have been paying me rent for 36 months. Valerie sways on her feet, the paper shaking violently in her hands. No. No, that is impossible. It is entirely factual, I reply. And according to my property manager, you are currently 60 days past due on your lease payments. You took the money you were supposed to use for rent and gave it to Preston to cover his margin calls, believing he would multiply it in the crypto market. You gambled your own shelter on his incompetence. I gesture toward the heavy oak doors where the sounds of Chloe and Preston's catastrophic fight continue to echo into the night. You have 30 days to vacate my property, I announce, my voice carrying finality. Do not bother appealing to the courts. The documentation is ironclad. Do not ask for an extension. I will not grant one. You, Chloe, and Preston need to start packing your bags immediately. Valerie collapses against the stone pillar, her knees buckling as the full crushing weight of her total ruin finally breaks her spine. She stares at me, a woman who has just realized that the daughter she spent 30 years throwing away is the only one holding the keys to her survival. I turn away from her, walking smoothly toward my waiting car. The camera continues to track backward, holding my perfectly composed expression as the mansion, the screaming sister, and the weeping, defeated mother fade into the background. The morning sun filters through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of my downtown penthouse, casting long, sharp shadows across the polished concrete floor. The silence up here is absolute, a flawless contrast to the chaotic implosion I orchestrated just 12 hours ago. I stand at the marble kitchen island, lifting a heavy crystal pitcher to pour a glass of iced water. The condensation drips against my skin, cool and grounding. I raise the glass to my lips, take a slow, deliberate sip, and turn my head. The invisible camera glides across the pristine expanse of the living room, panning past the imported Italian leather sofas and the original modern artwork before pushing in tight on my face. I look directly into the lens, breaking the fourth wall, and allow a slow, knowing smile to stretch across my face. Did you honestly believe they were just going to start packing their boxes? I ask the empty room, my voice laced with dark amusement. People like my mother do not accept defeat gracefully. When you back a cornered animal against a wall and strip away its illusions, it does not surrender. It bares its teeth. Right on cue, the chime of my private elevator echoes through the penthouse. I did not call security to stop them. I authorized their access the moment the concierge informed me of their arrival. I want them here. I want to see exactly what kind of desperate poison they have managed to concoct overnight. The polished steel doors slide open with a soft mechanical hiss. Valerie marches out first. She has abandoned yesterday's knit suit for a stark black dress, attempting to project the image of a grieving, aggrieved matriarch. Chloe trails closely behind her, clutching a designer handbag like a shield, her eyes darting nervously around the sprawling luxury of my home. But they are not alone. Flanking my mother is a man in a bespoke charcoal pinstripe suit. He carries a thick leather briefcase and wears the distinct predatory sneer of a high-priced corporate litigator. His eyes sweep my penthouse, assessing the square footage, calculating the net worth of his target. I do not offer them a seat. I do not offer them water. I remain perfectly still behind the kitchen island, placing my glass down with a soft, resonant clink against the marble. Zuri Harrington, the man announces, stepping forward and dropping his heavy briefcase directly onto my spotless counter. My name is Marcus Vance. I am senior counsel representing your mother, Valerie Harrington, and your sister, Chloe Sterling. I look at the briefcase, then up to his face. You are scuffing my marble, Mr. Vance. Vance smirks, entirely unbothered, and pops the brass latches. We are not here to exchange pleasantries. We are here to serve you with an emergency legal injunction. He pulls out a dense stack of legal documents and slides them across the island toward me. I do not look down at them. I keep my eyes locked on Valerie, who has squared her shoulders, her chin tilted up in that familiar haughty pose of absolute entitlement. "You thought you could throw us out into the street," Valerie says, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "You thought you could humiliate us, destroy your sister's marriage, and steal our family home. But you forgot one crucial detail, Zuri. You forgot who built this family. You forgot your grandfather's final wishes." I raise a single eyebrow, leaning my weight against the counter. "Enlighten me." Vance clears his throat, adopting the booming theatrical cadence of a courtroom performance. When Theodore Harrington established the foundational trusts and the holding companies that currently house your assets, he included a very specific ironclad contingency. It is a fiduciary competency clause. It states that if the primary beneficiary of the estate exhibits signs of severe mental instability, malicious intent toward the Harrington legacy, or behavior that actively endangers the family's welfare, their control over the corporate assets can be immediately suspended. Chloe steps out from behind our mother, her tear-stained face twisted into an ugly expression of triumph. "You are sick, Zuri," Chloe spits, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You have lost your mind. Only a deeply disturbed, psychotic person would maliciously sabotage her pregnant sister's life. Only a mentally unfit sociopath would attempt to evict her own mother." Valerie steps forward, placing her hands flat on the documents. "We filed an emergency petition with the probate judge at 8 o'clock this morning. We are invoking the competency clause. We are seizing control of the holding company. We are freezing every single one of your bank accounts, your corporate assets, and your real estate portfolio, including the deed to my house. Until a court-appointed psychiatrist evaluates you and a judge rules on your mental fitness, you do not have the authority to sign an eviction notice. You do not even have the authority to pay your own electric bill." Vance taps the paper with a gold fountain pen. "The injunction is active, Miss Harrington. Any attempt to move funds, sell assets, or enforce the eviction notice against your mother will be viewed as contempt of court. We are staging a complete hostile takeover of your assets for your own protection. You are financially paralyzed." The three of them stand there, a united front of weaponized desperation. They expect me to panic. They expect me to shout, to cry, to scramble for my phone and call my own legal team. They expect the heavy, suffocating threat of absolute financial ruin to break the iron composure I have maintained since I walked back into their lives. Instead, I let out a soft, genuine laugh. The sound bounces off the glass walls, completely devoid of fear. Vance's confident sneer falters. Chloe steps back, her eyes widening. Valerie's jaw tightens, her hands curling into fists against the marble counter. "A hostile takeover based on mental incompetence," I muse, shaking my head in mild disbelief. "It is a bold strategy, Valerie. It truly is. It reeks of absolute clawing desperation. But there is a glaring, fatal flaw in your brilliant legal maneuver." I pick up my crystal glass and take another slow sip of water, forcing them to wait in agonizing suspense. I swallow, set the glass down, and look directly into Marcus Vance's eyes. I look at his expensive suit, his gold pen, and the custom leather briefcase. "Tell me, Mr. Vance," I say, my voice dropping to a smooth, dangerous whisper. "A senior partner at a firm like yours requires a minimum retainer of $50,000 just to file an emergency injunction of this magnitude. And since my mother's credit cards are maxed out, and my sister's husband just lost every cent they had to unregulated crypto lenders, I have a very simple question for you." I lean across the counter, closing the distance between us. "Who exactly signed your retainer check this morning?" Vance's face instantly pales. The arrogant smirk vanishes from his lips, replaced by a sudden, rigid realization. He looks at Valerie, then back at me, his eyes darting frantically as the legal trap he just walked into snaps shut around his own ankles. I smile, cold and victorious. "I did not just buy the house, Valerie. I bought the debt. And I am about to show you what a real hostile takeover looks like." The reflection in the sterile glass-walled conference room captures a perfect sliding tableau. The invisible camera tracks smoothly across the polished surface of the mahogany conference table, capturing the players in this high-stakes theater. On one side sits Marcus Vance, his posture rigid with expensive arrogance, flanked by Valerie and Chloe. Their faces are arranged in practiced identical masks of smug superiority, masquerading as sorrow. On the opposite side of the vast table, sitting entirely alone, I wait. My posture is relaxed, my hands folded neatly over a single slim leather portfolio. I do not scowl. I do not fidget. I watch them with the calm predatory gaze of a hawk studying mice trapped in a glass jar. Marcus Vance clears his throat, clicking his gold fountain pen before slapping a massive leather-bound petition onto the center of the table. The sharp crack echoes off the glass walls meant to intimidate. It fails. We are here to formally execute the invocation of the Theodore Harrington Fiduciary Competency Clause, Vance announces, his voice booming with the practiced cadence of a courtroom bully. Miss Harrington, we have filed an emergency petition with the probate court this morning. Based on sworn affidavits from your immediate family and respected community leaders, we are moving to strip you of your controlling interest in the Harrington corporate assets, the family trust, and all associated holding companies. I do not look at the petition. I keep my eyes locked on Valerie. Go on, I say, my voice a soft, lethal purr. Let us hear the foundation of this brilliant legal maneuver. Vance squares his shoulders, pulling a sheet of paper from the stack. The foundation is your severe and rapid mental decline. Over the past 48 hours, you have exhibited erratic, violent, and deeply delusional behavior. You have engaged in a malicious campaign of fabrication designed to destroy your sister's marriage. You have attempted to illegally evict your mother from her rightful home. Your actions demonstrate a clear psychotic break from reality that endangers the financial and social welfare of this family. Vance leans back, crossing his arms. Therefore, under the provisions set forth by your late grandfather, your mother is stepping in to assume emergency conservatorship of your estate for your own protection. I tilt my head, a cold smile touching the corners of my mouth. A conservatorship. How remarkably unoriginal. Valerie immediately seizes her cue. She reaches into her designer handbag and produces a pristine white lace handkerchief. She presses it to the corner of her dry eyes, her lower lip trembling with an Oscar-worthy display of maternal devastation. This is breaking my heart, Zuri. Valerie whispers, her voice thick with manufactured grief. I never wanted it to come to this. I failed you as a mother. I watched you bury yourself in the corporate world, watched you take on all that stress, and I did nothing while it slowly broke your mind. She reaches her hand across the polished wood, her palm open in a gesture of fake desperate pleading. I pull my portfolio back a single inch, refusing the connection. Valerie drops her hand, letting a tragic sigh escape her lips. You came into my home last night raving like a lunatic. Valerie continues, playing entirely to the silent audience of the court stenographer recording the meeting. You projected these horrible paranoid delusions onto Preston. You fabricated documents to accuse a good, God-fearing man of stealing from the church. You stood in my foyer and laughed while you tried to throw your pregnant sister out onto the street. It was a vicious, unprovoked mental breakdown. You are tearing this family apart out of deep-seated jealousy, and I simply cannot sit by and let you destroy yourself or us. We just want to get you the help you need, sweetheart. This money is a burden you clearly cannot handle anymore. Chloe chimes in right on cue, placing a protective hand over her slightly rounded stomach. She glares at me, the smugness completely overriding her fake victimhood. You are a monster, Zuri! Chloe spits, her voice dripping with venom. You manipulated digital footage to frame my husband. You caused me severe emotional distress, risking the health of my unborn child, just to satisfy some sick vendetta, because you have always been jealous of my happiness. You are deeply disturbed, but we forgive you. We are going to put you in a very nice facility where you can rest, and Mom will take over the holding company, so the business does not suffer from your insanity. The audacity is truly breathtaking. They are attempting to gaslight me into a psychiatric facility to cover up their own financial crimes. They are using my grandfather's dying wish to protect the family legacy as a weapon to steal the empire I built from the ground up. I let the silence stretch out long and uncomfortable. Vance shifts in his expensive leather chair. Chloe drops her gaze, suddenly unable to maintain eye contact with my unwavering stare. Valerie grips her lace handkerchief so tightly, her knuckles turn white. Are you quite finished with the community theater performance? I ask, my tone entirely flat. Vance leans forward, pointing his pen at me. Do not make this harder than it needs to be, Miss Harrington. We have the affidavits, we have the legal precedent. You will sign this voluntary handover of power, or we will drag you through a grueling, highly public court battle that will permanently destroy your corporate reputation. We will freeze your accounts by noon. You have no way out. I slowly open my slim leather portfolio. I extract a single sheet of paper and place it gently on the table. Mr. Vance, I say, keeping my voice dangerously quiet. As an officer of the court, I assume you verified the claims in this petition before attaching your firm's name to it. I assume you checked the public records. I assume you verified the ownership of the estate my mother claims I am illegally evicting her from. Vance frowns, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his arrogant features. We verified that the estate belongs to the Harrington Family Trust. It belonged to the trust 5 years ago, I correct him smoothly, before my mother secretly leveraged it to secure loans for a failed boutique development, before it went into foreclosure, and before my private holding company registered under a subsidiary you clearly failed to search purchased the debt in full. I slide the paper across the table. It is a certified copy of the property deed bearing the stamp of the county clerk listing my holding company as the sole undisputed owner of the Buckhead mansion. I am not exhibiting delusional behavior, Mr. Vance. I am acting as a landlord executing a standard eviction for non-payment of rent. My mother is 60 days delinquent. Valerie's face drains of color. She stares at the deed, the reality of the document shattering her carefully constructed narrative of my insanity. But I am not done. I pull a second document from my portfolio. It is a thick stack of financial printouts. And as for my sister's claim that I am experiencing a paranoid breakdown regarding her husband, I suggest you look at page 3. Chloe snatches the stack of papers, her eyes widening in sheer panic as she reads the highlighted lines. That is the official audit report from the Church Outreach Fund. I state, ensuring my voice is loud and clear for the stenographer. Completed at 2 o'clock this morning by the Board of Trustees, it confirms exactly $45,000 is missing. And attached to it is the wire transfer receipt showing those exact funds moving into the business account of a midtown luxury apartment complex signed by Preston Sterling. I fold my hands on the table, leaning in toward the three of them. I am not crazy, Valerie. I am just the only one in this room telling the truth. And you just committed perjury on a formal court petition. From my perspective, looking over my shoulder at the three of them, the scene is almost tragic in its comedic timing. Marcus Vance is pale, his aggressive legal posturing instantly deflated by the revelation that I control the debt and the underlying assets of their entire existence. He is a corporate mercenary who has just realized he marched into a minefield armed with a water gun. But my sister and my mother lack his professional intuition. They are blinded by a lifetime of unchallenged entitlement and sheer unadulterated greed. Chloe steps forward, entirely ignoring the sudden rigid terror radiating from her attorney. She slams her manicured hand down on the polished glass table, the sharp smack echoing off the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse conference room. You are playing games, Zuri. Chloe snarls, her voice vibrating with a frantic, unhinged energy. You think throwing a few deeds and financial statements around changes the fundamental truth here. You are unwell. You have lost your grip on reality. Buying our debt just proves our point entirely. It proves you have an unhealthy, obsessive fixation on destroying this family. It is textbook paranoia. I do not respond. I remain seated in my high-backed leather chair. The visual framing is absolute. Looking past my shoulder, the three figures standing across from me look remarkably small against the sprawling panoramic backdrop of the city skyline glowing through the glass behind them. Chloe takes my silence as submission. She mistakes my clinical calm for the paralysis of a cornered prey. She pulls a thick fountain pen from Vance's frozen hand, prying it from his stiff fingers, and taps it aggressively against the signature line of the conservatorship petition. This is how this is going to work. Chloe dictates her tone, shifting into a sickening, patronizing sweetness that she has perfected over decades of manipulation. You are going to sign this document. You are going to sign over full executive control of your holding company and your real estate firm to Mother. Then you are going to transfer the deed of the Buckhead estate directly into my name. Preston and I need a secure, stress-free environment to raise our child away from your toxic interference. Valerie steps up beside her favorite daughter, seamlessly slipping back into the role of the benevolent, long-suffering matriarch. She reaches into her designer handbag and produces a pristine, white lace handkerchief. She presses it to the corner of her perfectly dry eyes, her lower lip trembling with an Oscar-worthy display of maternal devastation. "We are not monsters," Zuri Valerie says, placing a hand over her heart. "We are your family. We love you. We can see how much the stress of the corporate world has broken your mind. You are exhausted. You are making irrational, dangerous decisions. Once you sign these papers, we are going to take care of you. I watch them. I do not blink. I have already spoken to the clinical director at Serenity Pines." Valerie continues, dropping the name of the most exclusive, restrictive psychiatric wellness facility in the state. "It is a beautiful, quiet place, Zuri. Lush gardens, round-the-clock medical care, absolutely no access to the internet, no phones, and no outside stressors. You will have all the time in the world to rest your mind. We will manage your finances. We will make sure your companies continue to generate revenue. You will not have to worry about a single thing ever again." The sheer magnitude of their delusion hangs heavily in the sterile, air-conditioned atmosphere of the conference room. They are actively orchestrating a coup attempting to legally kidnap me and strip me of a billion-dollar empire, and they are pitching it to me as a luxury spa vacation. "Sign the papers, Zuri," Chloe demands, her voice rising, tinged with an ugly, impatient greed. "Sign them right now, or we will drag you into open court tomorrow morning. We will parade every piece of your erratic behavior in front of a judge. We will tell the press. We will ruin your reputation in this city permanently. You will be remembered as the crazy, unstable sister who had to be forcibly institutionalized. Sign the papers and we can handle this quietly." The invisible camera begins a slow, deliberate push-in. It moves past my shoulder, gliding silently across the polished glass table, inching closer and closer to my face. I remain absolutely silent. My lack of reaction begins to create a massive psychological vacuum in the room. In any high-stakes negotiation, silence is the heaviest weapon you can wield. It forces the opposition to fill the void, to over-explain, to expose the fragile foundation of their insecurities. Vance shifts uncomfortably. He leans down, his mouth hovering near Valerie's ear. "Mrs. Harrington," he whispers, his voice tight with warning. "I strongly advise we pause and review the ownership structures she just presented. If she holds the debt independently, this petition might constitute actionable fraud on our part." Valerie swats his hand away without even looking at him. "Shut up, Marcus. I am paying you to execute my orders, not to cower at her cheap parlor tricks." Valerie turns her severe gaze back to me. The maternal mask is slipping, entirely revealing the raw, calculating ambition underneath. "Do not test me today, Zuri. I am completely out of patience. You have humiliated us enough. You embarrassed me in front of the church elders. You caused a scene at my home. I will not let you hoard this vast wealth while your sister faces a financial crisis. You are going to surrender the assets, or I will personally ensure you are locked in a padded room before the sun sets." The camera continues its slow push, filling the frame entirely with my face. My expression is perfectly neutral, a mask of carved ice. I let the silence stretch. I let it drag on for 10 seconds, then 20. The heavy quiet becomes oppressive, suffocating them with their own unspoken dread. Chloe's breathing becomes shallow. She glances at her mother, a flicker of genuine panic breaking through her aggressive bravado. "Why isn't she saying anything?" Chloe mutters, stepping back slightly, the fountain pen shaking in her hand. "Mom, why is she just staring at us?" I let them drown in it. I let them exhaust every empty threat, every fake promise, every manipulative tactic they have spent 30 years perfecting. I watch them slowly realize that their words are bouncing off me like rain against bulletproof glass. They came into my sanctuary expecting a fight, expecting a terrified victim willing to negotiate her own surrender to avoid a public scandal. They brought a net to catch a lion. I look at Chloe's trembling hand. I look at Valerie's tightening jaw. I look at the sweating attorney who has finally realized his lucrative career is about to end in spectacular fashion. I sit in absolute terrifying silence, letting them finish their delusional demands. The silence in the room stretches to its absolute breaking point. Marcus Vance clears his throat, a sharp, abrasive sound that betrays the sudden spike of adrenaline in his system. He reaches out to tap the conservatory petition again, but before his gold pen can strike the glass, I raise my hand. A single raised finger. It is a microscopic gesture, but it stops him dead in his tracks. I reach beneath the lip of the mahogany table and press a small recessed silver button. The frosted glass doors of the conference room slide open with a soft hiss. My lead corporate counsel, Arthur Pendleton, steps into the room. He is a man who charges $1,000 an hour, and he looks every bit the apex predator that Vance is only pretending to be. Arthur does not spare a single glance for my mother or my sister. He walks directly to my side, places a pristine black leather folder on the table, and steps back, folding his hands behind his back. I stand up. As I push my chair back, the invisible camera locks onto my movement. It follows me, executing a smooth, continuous tracking shot as I begin a slow, deliberate walk around the perimeter of the massive conference table. My heels click against the polished concrete, a rhythmic, metronomic countdown to their total destruction. I let my hand trail lightly along the edge of the glass, circling the three of them like a shark assessing a cage diver's faulty equipment. Mr. Vance. I begin, my voice carrying effortlessly across the sterile room. You came into my building and threatened to seize my holding company. You invoked the Theodore Harrington Fiduciary Competency Clause. You intend to use my grandfather's dying mandate to prove I am a danger to the family trust, thereby placing my mother in control of my wealth. I stop walking just behind Marcus Vance's chair. I can see a bead of sweat forming at his hairline. It is a fascinating legal strategy. I continue, my tone conversational. It relies entirely on the premise that the assets I control, the real estate firm I built, and the holding company that owns my mother's foreclosed mansion are all sheltered under the umbrella of the original Harrington Family Trust. I resume my pacing, moving past Vance and stepping directly behind my mother's chair. I reach out and pick up the black leather folder Arthur brought in. I flip it open and drop a stack of thick yellow documents directly on top of Vance's fraudulent petition. These are the original unredacted foundational documents of the Theodore Harrington Trust, I announce, complete with the final audit conducted by the federal bankruptcy courts. Vance snatches the papers. His eyes dart back and forth across the densely typed pages. He flips to the second page, then the third. The arrogant sneer on his face dissolves, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. He looks at Valerie, his expression contorting into a mask of furious betrayal. You lied to me! Vance hisses, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You told me her tech acquisitions and real estate holdings were seeded by your father's estate. You told me she was operating as a subsidiary of the trust. Valerie turns in her chair, her face flushed with sudden panic. She is. She has to be. My father was a billionaire. He left the estate to me to manage, and she stole the capital to start her own firm. That is our money. I lean down. The camera pushes in tight, capturing the precise moment I lean over my mother's shoulder. I bring my face inches from her ear, ensuring she feels the cold certainty of every single word. There is no money, Mother. I whisper, my voice soft, lethal, and absolute. There has not been for a decade. Valerie freezes. Her breath hitches in her throat. Chloe stops glaring and stares at me, her mouth parting in silent confusion. I slowly straighten up, addressing the room at large. 10 years ago, while you were busy hosting charity galas and parading Chloe around country clubs to find her a rich husband, the market shifted. Grandfather made catastrophic investments in commercial retail spaces, just as the digital revolution decimated the sector. He bled capital for years trying to cover his margins. By the time he passed away, the Theodore Harrington Trust was nothing but a hollow shell of toxic debt. I walk back around to the head of the table, turning to face them directly. The trust went completely bankrupt 10 years ago, I state, letting the reality crash down upon them. It was formally liquidated by the courts. The trust you are trying to invoke, the trust you just filed a sworn affidavit to protect, has contained absolutely $0 for a decade. It does not exist. Chloe shakes her head, her hands gripping the edge of the glass table. No, that is impossible. We live in a mansion. We drive luxury cars. We go to Aspen every summer. We have a family legacy. You have a fantasy, Chloe, I correct her sharply. A fantasy funded entirely by unsecured credit shadow lenders and my own quiet interventions to keep you out of federal court. The holding company I own has zero legal ties to the Harrington Trust. I built my empire with my own capital, my own software patents, and my own sweat. I did not take a single dime from this family because this family had absolutely nothing to give. I gesture to the disgraced attorney who is rapidly shoving his files back into his briefcase. Mr. Vance just realized that he filed an emergency injunction to seize control of a trust that has been legally dead for 10 years. He also realizes that by attempting to seize my independent self, made corporate assets under the guise of that dead trust, he has just committed actionable career-ending fraud. Vance stands up so quickly, his heavy leather chair tips backward, crashing into the glass wall. I am dropping you as a client, Vance says, his voice vibrating with panic. Miss Harrington, I was operating under false pretenses provided by your mother. I retract the petition entirely. He does not wait for a response. He grabs his briefcase and practically sprints out of the conference room, the sliding glass doors hissing shut behind him. The silence that settles over the room now is different. It is not the silence of tension. It is the silence of a graveyard. Valerie is staring at her empty hands. The lace handkerchief drops to the floor. The regal commanding matriarch has been utterly stripped away, leaving behind a terrified hollow woman who has just realized her entire identity is a hallucination. She looks up at me, her eyes wide, raw, and completely shattered. You let me believe, Valerie whispers, her voice cracking. All these years you let me believe I was wealthy. I let you dig your own grave, I correct her coldly. You demanded I sign over my company to you because you thought I was mentally unfit, but you are the one who just walked into a lawyer's office to stage a corporate coup for an empire of ghosts. Chloe lets out a sudden, ragged sob. She buries her face in her hands, the reality of her husband's embezzlement and her family's total financial ruin finally breaking her. My lawyer, Arthur, steps forward, placing a single pen next to the eviction notice I served them last night. You have 29 days to vacate my property, I tell them, my voice echoing in the sterile room. I suggest you start packing. You are going to need the head start. The soft chime of the elevator rings out, a cheerful mechanical sound that violently contrasts with the absolute devastation behind me. I reach out to press the call button, fully intending to leave them alone with their ruin, when a desperate scrambling noise echoes across the polished concrete floor. Zuri, please wait. The voice is completely unrecognizable. It is stripped of all its usual haughty refinement, reduced to a raw, animalistic screech. I stop, my finger hovering an inch from the glowing button, and slowly turn around. Valerie is on her hands and knees. She has literally crawled across the space separating the conference table from the elevator bank. Her expensive knit dress is twisted around her legs, her immaculate hair ruined by her own grasping hands. She looks up at me, her face a smeared mess of expensive mascara and sheer, unadulterated terror. You cannot do this, Valerie gasps, struggling to push herself up, though her legs seem unable to support her weight. You cannot just walk away. There has to be a mistake. The accounts, the properties, the legacy. You said it was a dummy account. You said it was your money. If it is your money, you can just turn it back on. You can just authorize the transfers, please, Zuri. We are your blood. I look down at her. The woman who spent my entire childhood telling me I was too loud, too ambitious, and too unrefined to ever truly represent the Harrington name is now begging at my feet like a stray dog. It is a pathetic sight. It does not bring me joy. It brings me a profound, absolute sense of closure. I step past her, moving back into the center of the room. The invisible camera tracks my movement, sliding perfectly into position. I stop, square my shoulders, and look directly into the lens, completely ignoring my mother sobbing on the floor behind me. I let a cold, triumphant smile stretch across my face. People often misunderstand the mechanics of true revenge. I say, my voice steady, intimate, and directed entirely at the audience. They think it requires screaming. They think it requires throwing glasses, staging dramatic public confrontations, or destroying physical property. But the most devastating weapon you can wield against people who worship money is mathematics. It is cold, hard, undisputed arithmetic. When you remove the emotion from the equation, you strip them of their ability to manipulate you. You leave them with nothing but the bottom line. I hold my gaze on the lens for one more beat, letting the absolute finality of the moment sink in before I turn my attention back to the wreckage of my family. Chloe is still sitting on the floor by the table, hugging her knees to her chest. She is rocking back and forth, muttering to herself, unable to process the fact that she is about to be the wife of a disgraced broke embezzler. I did not just freeze the trust, Valerie, I announced, my voice echoing off the glass walls. I closed the charity account entirely. I completely liquidated the Harrington Legacy Fund. Valerie flinches as if physically struck. Do you know what it is like, Valerie? I ask, pacing slowly around the perimeter of the room. Do you know what it is like to sit in a boardroom fighting off hostile takeovers, negotiating billion-dollar acquisitions, and then receiving an alert on your phone that your mother just spent $12,000 on a custom handbag? Do you know the sheer discipline it took for me to manually approve those transactions? To watch you squander my hard-earned capital while you simultaneously told your country club friends that I was a bitter antisocial workaholic who lacked family values? Valerie covers her mouth, fresh tears spilling over her cheeks. I didn't know, she sobs. I didn't know it was you. You did not care to know, I correct her sharply. The money you have been burning through for a decade was mine. It was generated by my software patents, my real estate acquisitions, and my sleepless nights. I paid for your entire reality. And as of yesterday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the balance of that account is officially zero. Valerie lets out a sound that is half gasp, half scream. She slumps forward, her forehead nearly touching the concrete floor. Zero, I repeat, making sure the syllable rings in her ears. You have absolutely nothing. Your checking accounts are overdrawn. Your savings do not exist. The lines of credit you took out against the house are being called in by the lenders because the collateral belongs to me. You are completely and utterly bankrupt. Mom, do something! Chloe suddenly shrieks, snapping out of her catatonic state. She scrambles to her feet, pointing a shaking finger at Valerie. You told me this was handled. You told me we were seizing her assets. You told Preston he was safe. You ruined my life. You lied to me. Valerie stares at Chloe, her expression twisting from despair into a sudden, vicious rage. I lied to you, Valerie snaps, struggling to stand, her voice dripping with venom. You greedy, ungrateful little girl. I spent a fortune paying for your lavish wedding. I bought you that lifestyle. I covered up your husband's pathetic attempts at theft. If you had not been so desperate to steal from the church, Zuri never would have looked into the audits. This is your fault. It is mine! Chloe screams back, her face red, her fists clenched at her sides. You are the one who took out loans against a house you did not own. You are the one who tried to put your own daughter in a psychiatric ward to steal her money. I stand perfectly still, watching them tear each other to pieces. The unified front they presented just 20 minutes ago has completely evaporated. The moment the money disappeared, their loyalty vanished right along with it. They are turning on each other like starving wolves fighting over a barren bone. It is the ultimate validation of everything I have known for the past 10 years. Their love was entirely transactional. I clear my throat, a sharp, commanding sound that slices through their screaming match. They both freeze, turning their tear-stained faces back to me. You have 29 days to vacate my house, Valerie, I remind her, my tone entirely devoid of sympathy. If you are not out by the 30th day, I will have the sheriff forcibly remove your belongings and place them on the curb. Chloe, you and Preston might want to start looking for a criminal defense attorney who works pro bono because the church board is filing formal embezzlement charges first thing Monday morning. I turn on my heel and walk back to the private elevator. I press the button. The doors slide open instantly with a soft mechanical hiss. I step inside the wood-paneled car, turning to face the room one last time. Valerie takes a stumbling step forward, reaching her hand out toward the closing doors. Zuri, please. What are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to go? I look at the woman who gave birth to me. I look at the sister who spent her entire life trying to make me feel small. Go find a job, I say. The steel doors slide shut, sealing them inside the glass room with nothing but the echo of their own destruction. The steel doors slide shut, sealing them inside the glass room with nothing but the echo of their own destruction. But my departure is only the prelude. I do not press the button for the parking garage. I press the button for the mezzanine observation deck. My private elevator is a transparent glass cylinder that glides smoothly down the center of the architectural atrium, offering a panoramic, unobstructed view of the conference room I just exited. I step out onto the suspended glass walkway. I do not look away. I watch the two women who tormented me for a lifetime sitting in the wreckage of their own avarice. Before they can even begin to process the absolute totality of their ruin, a harsh, rhythmic flashing bleeds through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the building's facade. Red and blue lights cut through the sterile corporate lighting, painting the glass walls of the conference room in violent alternating colors. The heavy oak doors at the far end of the conference room burst open. Preston Harrington, Chloe's husband, storms into the room. His normally immaculate bespoke suit is rumpled. His silk tie is loosened, and his face is a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. He is out of breath, looking frantically around the room until his eyes lock onto Chloe. He rushes toward her, grabbing her by the shoulders, shaking her as he speaks rapidly. I reach into my pocket and pull out my phone. With 2 taps, I access the conference room's internal security feed and route the audio directly into my earpiece. I want to hear every single syllable of their downfall, the sound of their panic pipes crystal clear into my ear. Chloe, the accounts are frozen. Preston gasps, his voice trembling with manic desperation. The church board locked me out of the main server an hour ago. The bank is refusing my calls. Did your mother talk to Zuri? Did she get the conservatorship signed? We need the trust capital right now. Chloe just stares at him, her mascara running down her face in thick, dark rivers. There is no trust, Preston. She chokes out, her voice a hollow, broken rasp. There is no money. Zuri owns everything. We are bankrupt. Preston's face drains of all color. He stumbles backward, running a hand through his hair. No, that is impossible. Valerie told me the Harrington estate was impenetrable. He does not realize he was followed. The oak doors swing open again. This time it is not a panicked embezzler seeking refuge. 4 men and 2 women stride into the room, their movements sharp, coordinated, and absolute. They wear dark windbreakers with stark yellow lettering across the back. FBI. I stand perfectly still behind the glass of the mezzanine. I turn and look directly into the invisible camera lens, my expression cold and triumphant. I watch the final act of this masterpiece unfold exactly as I engineered it. The lead agent, a tall, broad-shouldered man, steps directly up to Preston. He flashes a gold badge. Preston stumbles backward, his brief flash of arrogance completely dissolving. He raises his hands in a pathetic, trembling gesture of surrender. Preston Harrington, the lead agent, states, his voice carrying the heavy, undeniable weight of federal authority. You are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and the embezzlement of $2.4 million from the Oak Brook Community Church Development Fund. Chloe lets out a piercing, blood-curdling scream. The sound vibrates through the audio feed, shrill and agonizingly desperate. She lunges toward the agent, her hands clawing the air. No, you cannot do this. Do you know who we are? We are Harringtons. My husband is a respected financial advisor. This is a mistake. Let go of him. A female agent steps smoothly into Chloe's path, placing a firm, unyielding hand on her chest and shoving her back. Ma'am, step away from the suspect immediately. Do not interfere with a federal investigation. Preston does not fight. He completely folds. The arrogant, slick-talking opportunist who looked down his nose at me at every Thanksgiving dinner, who mocked my business ventures, is openly weeping. His shoulders shake as the lead agent pulls his arms behind his back. The sharp metallic click of handcuffs echoes through the room, ringing out like a judge's gavel slamming down on their entire existence. You have the right to remain silent. The agent continues, reading the Miranda warning with mechanical precision as he spins Preston around toward the doors. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Preston locks eyes with Valerie. Valerie, do something. Call your lawyers. Call the trust administrators. You have to post my bail. Valerie does not move. She sits frozen in her chair, staring at the heavy steel cuffs biting into Preston's wrists. She cannot call her high-priced lawyers because she cannot afford a single hour of their retainer. She cannot call the trust because the trust is a ghost. The illusion of her omnipotence has been shattered so thoroughly that she cannot even formulate a sentence. She is a woman who has just watched her entire universe collapse into dust. I watch through the glass, listening to the feed, feeling an absolute icy satisfaction. I did not just freeze their allowances. I did not just cut off their access to my wealth. I spent the last 3 weeks conducting a brutal, microscopic forensic audit of every single transaction Preston ever made using the dummy accounts. When I discovered he was using my money to cover up his systematic theft from his own church congregation, I did not fire him. I did not warn him. I compiled every ledger, every wire transfer, every fraudulent invoice, and I hand-delivered a 500-page dossier directly to the regional director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Chloe collapses onto the glass conference table, sobbing hysterically, screaming Preston's name as the federal agents march her husband out of the room. He is paraded through the hallway, his head hung low in ultimate disgrace, directly past the floor-to-ceiling windows facing the street. By tomorrow morning, his mugshot will be plastered across every local news channel. By tomorrow afternoon, the country club will formally revoke their membership. I shift my gaze back to Valerie. She is staring out the window at the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the downtown skyscrapers. Her breathing is shallow. Her perfectly manicured hands are trembling uncontrollably in her lap. She is calculating the sum total of her new reality. The sprawling mansion is gone. The luxury cars are gone. The designer wardrobes will have to be sold just to afford groceries. The elite social status she worshipped her entire life, the weapon she used to bludgeon me since childhood, has vanished into thin air. She is the mother of a destitute daughter and the mother-in-law of a convicted federal felon. She will be a social pariah. The wealthy friends she played tennis with will cross the street to avoid her. The charity boards she sat on will publicly distance themselves from her name. She has been stripped of everything she valued, left with nothing but the hollow shell of a name that no longer holds any power. She is finally completely powerless, a queen ruling over an empire of dust. I pull the earpiece out, cutting off the sound of Chloe's wailing. I turn away from the glass overlooking the atrium and walk toward the private exit. I have spent my entire life trying to prove my worth to people who were fundamentally incapable of recognizing it. Today, I stop trying. Today, I simply take what is mine. My heels click against the marble floor, a steady, powerful rhythm of a woman who has reclaimed her life. The heavy glass doors slide open, welcoming me out into the cool evening air. I step out onto the pavement, the flashing police lights washing over me for a brief moment before the squad cars pull away in a blare of sirens, taking Preston Harrington to federal holding. I do not look back at the building. I do not look back at the family that tried to destroy me. I walk toward my waiting car, stepping into my future, completely unburdened and entirely free. The heavy glass doors of the lobby part with a quiet, deferential sweep, releasing me from the sterile, refrigerated air of the corporate battlefield. A Steadicam locks onto my back, capturing the sharp, rhythmic impact of my heels against the pavement. The camera follows me in a smooth, continuous tracking shot, moving exactly at my pace. Every step I take puts another insurmountable barrier of distance between myself and the catastrophic wreckage of the family I just left behind. I step out into the bright, unforgiving Atlanta sun. The heat hits me instantly, thick and unapologetic, carrying the ambient roar of the living city. Sirens wail in the distance, a fading echo of Preston Harrington being hauled away to federal holding, but the sound barely registers over the rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins. For the first time in 10 years, I am not carrying the crushing, suffocating weight of my mother's entitlement or my sister's vanity. My posture shifts, relaxing into a state of absolute unburdened power. I reach into my bag, retrieve my dark, oversized sunglasses, and slide them onto my face. The tinted lenses cut the harsh glare of the midday sun, shielding my eyes and solidifying the impenetrable armor I have forged for myself. Deep inside my designer purse, my phone begins to vibrate. I do not stop walking. I simply slide my hand into the leather compartment and pull the device out, holding it up to the light. The caller ID flashes wildly on the screen. It is Valerie. I swipe the screen to answer and bring the phone to my ear, not saying a single word. I simply listen. Zuri, you have to stop this! Valerie's voice burst through the speaker, a shrill, hyperventilating panic that borders on absolute hysteria. There are federal agents taking boxes out of Preston's office. The bank just called to say they are foreclosing on the estate. You cannot do this to us. You cannot leave me like this. I am your mother, Zuri. We are blood. You are my flesh and blood. You owe me your loyalty. You have to fix this. Please, I am begging you. I keep walking toward the curb. I do not feel a shred of pity. I do not feel a flicker of guilt. I do not even feel anger anymore. The woman on the other end of the line is a complete stranger to me. She is a parasite that has finally been detached from its host, flailing blindly in the open air, realizing it has no ability to survive on its own. I give her exactly 3 seconds. 1. The sound of her ragged, desperate sobbing filling my ear. 2. The realization that she will never ever change her transactional view of my existence. 3. The absolute certainty that I will never allow her to siphon another second of my peace. I pull the phone away from my face. I look at the active call screen. I press the red button to hang up. Then with a single decisive tap of my thumb, I select her contact profile and press block. I do the same for Chloe. I do the same for Preston. I sever the digital tethers instantly, cleanly, and permanently. I drop the silenced phone back into my purse, feeling the final heavy chain of my generational trauma shatter into dust. The Steadicam unhooks from its position behind me. It glides forward, executing a flawless, fluid 180-degree arc. The lens circles my body, capturing the reflection of the towering skyscrapers in the glass of the building behind me, before coming to a dead stop directly in front of my face. I look dead into the center of the lens. The fourth wall shatters completely. Sometimes the trash takes itself out, I say, my voice smooth, resonant, and utterly devoid of mercy. You just have to be willing to open the door. I hold the gaze for 1 beat longer, sealing the promise of my own autonomy before I turn my attention to the street. A sleek black SUV is idling perfectly at the curb, its dark tinted windows gleaming in the afternoon sun. Standing beside the open rear passenger door is Arthur, my lead corporate counsel, looking remarkably unruffled by the systematic destruction of a legacy empire he just facilitated. Beside him stands my chief operating officer Marcus, holding a tablet and smiling a sharp, knowing smile. And flanking the vehicle are 2 members of my private security detail, their posture rigid, their loyalty unquestionable. They do not look at me as a bank account. They do not look at me as a scapegoat. They look at me as the architect of an empire, a woman who built her own table when she was denied a seat at her family's. This is the family I chose. This is the circle I built with mutual respect, relentless hard work, and unyielding loyalty. Excellent timing on the federal warrants. Zuri Arthur notes, his tone dry and professional as he steps back to clear my path. The regional director sends his regards. The asset seizure is already in full effect. Let them have it all. Arthur, I reply, stepping up to the vehicle. My voice carries a lightness I have never known before. Cancel all remaining vendor contracts associated with the Harrington estate by close of business. Route the reclaimed capital directly into the expansion fund for the new tech campus. Consider it done, Marcus says, tapping a swift confirmation into his tablet. We have a board meeting in 45 minutes to finalize the overseas acquisitions. I pause with my hand on the frame of the SUV. I look at the team I built, the empire that belongs entirely to me, and the sprawling infinite possibilities of a future where I no longer have to carry the dead weight of my past. I am 24 years old, a self-made billionaire, and I have never felt more alive. Let us go build the future, I tell them. I slide into the plush leather interior of the vehicle. Arthur shuts the heavy armored door behind me with a solid, definitive thud. The engine hums to life. The SUV merges seamlessly into the bustling Atlanta traffic, carrying me away from the ruins of the Harrington name and toward a destiny I forged with my own two hands.